Title: The Lantern Keeper. The wind howled through the jagged cliffs of Marrow Point, carrying with it the salt of the sea and the weight of forgotten promises. At the edge of the world, where the land crumbled into the churning Atlantic, stood the Marrow Light, a lighthouse as old as the storms it defied. Its keeper, Elias Crow, was older still, or so the villagers whispered. His face was a map of creases, each line etched by years of solitude and secrets, and his eyes held the glint of a man who'd seen too much of the dark. Elias rose before dawn, as he had every morning for 40 years. The lantern room was his sanctuary, its great glass eye watching the horizon with unblinking resolve. He polished the lenses until they gleamed, checked the oil in the wick burner, and wound the clockwork that kept the beams sweeping through the fog. The work was rote, but it was his. The light was his. It tethered him to the world, even as the world forgot him. This morning, though, something was different. A letter lay on the stone floor beneath the door, its edges curled as if it had traveled through damp and time. Elias's hands trembled as he picked it up. The envelope bore no stamp, no address, only his name, written in a hand so familiar it stole his breath. Clara, his wife, gone these 20 years, lost to the sea in a storm that had shattered his heart as surely as it had wrecked her boat. He tore the envelope open, his calloused fingers clumsy with haste. Inside was a single sheet, the ink smudged but legible. Meet me at the cove tonight, when the light turns. I've waited long enough. No signature, but none was needed. The words were hers, looping and elegant, like the songs she used to hum while mending nets by the fire. Elias stood frozen, the paper trembling in his grip. It was impossible. Clara was dead. He'd seen the wreckage, held the sodden shawl they'd pulled from the waves. Yet the letter felt alive, urgent, as if her voice had clawed its way through the years to reach him. He pressed it to his chest, where his heart thudded like a warning. All day he worked in a daze. The lenses gleamed too brightly. The oil smelled sharp, like regret. He climbed the spiral stairs again and again, checking the lantern, the gears, anything to keep his hands busy while his mind churned. Was it a cruel jest? Some villager's prank? No, the handwriting was too perfect, too much like hers. And the cove. Only Clara had known what that place meant to them. It was where they'd first kissed, where they'd sworn to outlast the storms together. As dusk fell, the sky bruised purple, and the wind grew teeth. Elias lit the lantern, its beam cutting through the gathering dark like a blade. He stood at the window, watching the light sweep the horizon, each pass a heartbeat. When the light turns. That was Clara's phrase for midnight, when the beam aligned with the cove's hidden mouth. He'd laughed at her whimsy once. Now it felt like a summons. He donned his oilskin coat and took the old brass lantern from the hook by the door. Its flame flickered as he descended the cliff path, the rocks slick beneath his boots. The sea roared below, hungry and endless, and he wondered if it had always been waiting for him. The cove was a crescent of black sand, walled by cliffs that seemed to lean inward, guarding their secrets. He'd not come here since her death. The memories were too heavy, too sharp. At the water's edge, he stopped. The lantern's glow danced on the waves, and the lighthouse beams swept overhead, a metronome of light and shadow. "Clara," he whispered, his voice swallowed by the wind. "If you're here, show me." The sea answered first, a low, keening wail, like a song half remembered. Then he saw it, a shape in the surf, pale and fleeting, like moonlight on water. His breath caught as it moved closer, resolving into a figure. She wore the dress he'd buried her in, white as bone, and her hair streamed wet and dark, just as it had when she'd laughed and pulled him into the waves on summer nights. "Elias," she said, and her voice was the tide itself, soft and relentless. "You kept the light." He staggered forward, the lantern slipping from his hand to hiss in the sand. "Clara, how?" His words broke, useless against the weight of her presence. She was real, impossibly real, her eyes holding the same fierce love he'd carried in his dreams. "I never left," she said. "Not truly, but you've carried me alone too long." He reached for her, desperate to feel her warmth, but his fingers passed through her like mist. She smiled, sad and knowing, and gestured to the sea. "The light calls us both, Elias. Let it go." He shook his head, tears burning his eyes. "I can't. It's all I have." "No," she whispered. "It's what kept you here. For me." The beams swept over them again, and in its glare, she began to fade, her form unraveling into silver threads. "Wait," he cried, lunging forward, but the waves surged, cold and final, and she was gone. Elias fell to his knees, the sea soaking his coat, his hands empty. Above, the lighthouse stood silent, its light still turning, unyielding. He stayed there until dawn, until the tide retreated and the gulls began their mournful cries. The letter was gone, washed away or never real, but her words lingered, heavy as truth. When he climbed back to the lighthouse, his steps were slower, his shoulders bent. He lit the lantern again, as he always would, but something had shifted, like a knot loosened in his chest. Clara was gone, and yet she wasn't. The light would turn, night after night, and he would keep it burning, not for her, but for them both. Thank you, amazing viewers. We're so grateful to you for listening to our story videos on English through stories. Your support for adventures like The Mystery of the Silent Clock and The Lantern Keeper means the world to us. Keep learning English with us. More exciting stories are coming.